Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Still with you here on LTV International, and of course our continued coverage of the Saudi Crown Prince's visit to Egypt, where today President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi received the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who arrived in Cairo in a very important visit, which comes at a very, very important time. Of course, lots of discussions are to be held between the two leaders, and we are delighted to be joined this evening in our studios here at LTV by our distinguished guest, His Excellency Ambassador Medhat Miligy, the former assistant to the Foreign Minister. It's a very good afternoon to you, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you so much for your time today.
Good afternoon to you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. A very important visit. Let me start by asking you, Mr. Ambassador, how do you see, the political significance of this visit, specifically at this time?
Well, actually, at this junction, it was very important, this meeting. I mean, we all know that Egypt and Saudi Arabia are the cornerstone of the Arab security and stability.
Absolutely.
And when both of them join efforts, that's mean a big deal for the region. And since I think the catalyst of this visit is the current invasion of Israel to Lebanon, not to mention, of course, the massacres and the genocide that's taking place in Palestine, and Israeli desire to escalate this war to further horizons. And it was a due time for both leaders of the biggest two countries of the region to meet in order to coordinate their efforts and see what could be the next step. I believe that both leaders have seen, if I may say, that we've seen in this war the true image of all the countries involved. We've seen how the United States is behaving, how the West in general is behaving.
The international community's reaction really has
been whether in our favor or in favor of Israel. I was just, reading that the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Germany, for instance, have declared that Israel has the right to defend itself, even if they attack areas where civilians are there, since there are any militants from...
Even after all these atrocities
that
and
was
human
just
rights
yesterday.
abuses. Wow.
And this is, we do understand, of course, the complex of guilt, especially from Germany regarding Israel after the Second World War. But let me use your platform to say that to talk to the Germans and tell them that you are not responsible for what happened during the Second World War. This was another era with other people. All of them have passed away, and you are a country that has always been respectful for respecting human rights and respecting the international law and the international humanitarian law. And it's a pity to see something like that. However, coming once again to the visit of His Excellency, the Crown, His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, we have always known that the custodian of the two holy mosques and his Crown Prince have always supported Egypt, and even before that, but it is very crystallized and concrete even more at this phase. Of course, we have this military aspect, especially that we know that there is military cooperation between Saudi Arabia and Egypt. This is on one side, and we have, of course, bilateral relations, especially in the fields of economy and investment, which are going to be, I believe, largely discussed during the current round.
And we will, of course, be also largely discussing them during our coverage. But just before we move into the economic and investment side of the visit, still with the political developments in the region. Now, how do you see these two heavyweights, Egypt and Saudi Arabia being heavyweights in the Arab region and the Arab world, working together to cooperate, to defend the security of the region as a whole? We've seen Egypt and Saudi Arabia both calling for a ceasefire, calling for the sustainable delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza, calling for a lack of escalation into a spillover rather of the conflict into other countries in the region, and this has already happened, as we are seeing now in Lebanon. How can they collaborate in this regard to become more effective in this crisis?
Well, I think the most important thing is to have a one vision towards the issue. And this is very important because we heard, and I think that some of these rumors might be true, that there is not one Arab position. But when it comes to Egypt and Saudi Arabia, they have an identical point of view. Saudi Arabia have declared, and on the tongue of His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince himself, that Saudi Arabia is not thinking of escalating the scope of the relation with Israel to a higher level as long as there isn't an independent Palestinian state. And this has stopped all the rumors, including the declaration of the Prime Minister of Israel in the United Nations when he mentioned the cooperation in the Middle East, neglecting what His Royal Highness have said regarding that Saudi Arabia is not thinking of in any way to further develop its relation with Israel as long as there isn't an independent Palestinian state on the borders of the 4th of June 1967. I think this is a very important issue because it shows the identity, I mean the real similarity of the Egyptian position and the Saudi ones. But this is not the only thing actually. I mean Israel is keen to have strong ties and relation with Israel, and maybe this can deter it from continuing the so-called self-defense war that it's waging of the region. I hope that this collaboration between Egypt and Saudi Arabia and coordination in positions between both countries will permit finally Israel to listen to the voice of reason, as we say, and try to see its real interest in having peace in the region, if it really wants peace as they claim. Because as far as we've seen, they are trying to escalate the scope of this war for as maximum as they can. And unfortunately, the United States is helping them this. Just also yesterday, the United States have declared several declarations that they see actually very hostile towards the region. First, that they are sending troops or officers and soldiers to help Israel to defend itself. Now we are not talking about an Israel offensive as much as we are talking about an Israeli-American offensive, and this is one thing. Second,
and this can really change the scope of the
war. Of course. I mean, if we go a little bit back, and if we remember especially that we are celebrating now the 6th of October war and our victory over Israel in this war, we all remember President Sadat when he said, I cannot fight the Americans and the Israelis at the same time. And this is what the United States is doing right now. I mean, and this is not a secret. I mean, these are declarations said by the Minister of Defense of the United States.
The US administration.
So the situation is very actually tense and very provocative.
Indeed, and you were going to mention the second declaration by the US?
The second one is that there a new deal of arms to Israel, as if what was given was not enough so far.
Instead of actually sanctioning arms to Israel.
No, actually sanctioning, this is our position. But of course, Germany and the United Kingdom and even France, although have spoken against sanctions, but we haven't seen this. And this will draw us once again to the point of what are the real position, as I said in the beginning, what are the real positions of these countries? I mean, we hear very encouraging words about the necessity of having of achieving a two-state solution, and the necessity of stopping Israel from continuing its genocide against the Palestinian civil population. But at the same time, we see other things that shows a complete support to the Israeli defense policy, which are not defense anymore. But anyway, this is the name of it. So I think that at this junction, it's very important for Egypt and Saudi Arabia to collaborate their efforts and to organize what they can do in order to stop this war from spreading and spilling on the whole region.
Which they warned about this
from the beginning.
From the beginning of
exactly,
the first
but as we see, I mean, we never found any Israeli official accepting this. We all know the reasons. They are internal reasons and external reasons. The internal reasons are the most important one, which is the corruption case against the Prime Minister of Israel that could erupt the moment this war will stop. So it's not in his own political interest to stop the war at this moment. That's why he is continuing. And there is a second hope, which is to force the United States, which actually it's starting to do, to enter this war under the name of the war against Iran. But I think this is going to actually cause trouble for the whole region, not just for Iran.
Absolutely. Back to Saudi-Egyptian ties now. How far do you see this visit to move to some economic part of the discussion? How do you see this visit underscoring some of the unique ties and relationship between Egypt and Saudi Arabia when it comes to economic ties? Egypt, of course, serving as a strategic depth for Saudi Arabia as well, and vice versa.
Well, I think first of all we have to mention one thing, and I personally I'm keen to mention this. We have to salute the Egyptian president and his government for the efforts they did to reform the infrastructure in order to be able to attract new
investments, yes.
And this is what we see. I mean, we've seen this with the European Union when there was a huge visit of the European Union as an institution, not just bilateral basis with some European countries, but with the whole institution of the European Union. And this would not have happened if we did not reform our infrastructure in the field of economy. And I think this is what encouraged now Crown Prince to come to Egypt and talk about several projects, from which I would mention the one that comes on top of them, which is Ras Banas. We heard about this project. It's a $25 billion project as far as we heard, and we hope that we can conclude the deal this time in order to have foreign investment. The idea is not just about Ras Banas, but all the industries that are going to accompany such a mega project, yes, if we may say. Macroeconomy is one of the things that Egypt now is starting, and we've seen this before with the UAE when they came for Ras Al Hikmah project, and they invested $25 billion to promote the whole region, and now Saudi Arabia might be signing a same deal regarding Ras Banas, which is one of the most beautiful areas in Egypt. I have visited myself this area, and I know the potential it has in the field of tourism. Let's just mention, because people sometimes are talking about the huge amount of money invested. We are not talking about just one touristic spot to be promoted, but we are talking about the whole area, yes, with all what it entails in whether we're talking industry, society, more jobs, creation,
almost
of
urbanizing the whole area.
Exactly. So this is what we need. Let's not forget that Egypt, the majority of the surface of Egypt is desert, and we have to promote these areas, and we have to develop it further in order to sustain the 110 almost million Egyptians who are living on this land, not to mention the 10 millions of refugees.
Absolutely. Your Excellency, tell us a bit about Egypt's efforts really to address issues that have been faced by Saudi investors. We've seen the Prime Minister speaking about already out of like 100 complaints or so, almost 75% of them have been addressed, and the rest will be addressed by the end of the year. How important do you see addressing such challenges facing, for example, Saudi investors in order to create further investments and provide incentives to Saudi investors, for example, things like the golden license, for example, speeding up setting up of a project or setting up of a company or investment opportunity in Egypt?
Well, I think it's quite simple, actually. We started the way already, and there is no turning back on the reforms that
yes,
that Egypt is undertaking in order to facilitate and to attract more investments in the country. Having said that, I think that one of the most important things is the tax reform, and this is a project that the Prime Minister himself spoke about it, yes, a few days ago, about a new project that is going to be presented in order to facilitate more investors locally and internationally. Not to mention, of course, a country like Saudi Arabia, and I mention it by name because it's our largest investor from the Middle East. So we have to see what they are looking for in order to attract them more. We are not talking about a country who is asking for a small favor. We are talking about our major partner in economy in the Middle East. So we have to tailor maybe some tax reforms, some other attractions in order to attract more investors. Let's not forget that although the two heads of state are trying their utmost to further cooperate and further integrate with each other, but mainly who are going to do the investments is the private sector, and those are looking for some facilities, or else they will be looking for other countries that will provide them with more facilities. So if we do not attract them with tax reductions or any other type of facilities that will enable them to start their work and to multiply their benefits, they will look for another country that could present that to them. So I think this is the most important, and we are aware of it. I mean, it's not a coincidence that the Prime Minister himself spoke about this.
He spoke about, the announced new tax facilitation measures, addressing tax disputes, as well as ensuring transparency. And always investors speak about the importance of transparency when it's a business relationship between them and any other country.
Well, first, it's incentives, and second, it's speed, and this is maybe the key word that we're looking for, is that any dispute could be quickly resolved in order not to scare this investor or others who are thinking about investing in Egypt.
Indeed.
And I think, once again, that the most important thing is the reforms that we've done to the infrastructure. This huge roads and infrastructure in terms of transportation, this will definitely help a lot to boost any projects that are taking place. We are talking, once again, I'm talking here about macro projects. We are talking about macroeconomy, which are not just small projects like a small factory or so. We are talking about industries, about cities, about things that Egypt needs, and Saudi Arabia is ready to invest if we provide them with the necessary equipment.
Indeed. Your Excellency, now over 5,700 Egyptian companies are also currently operating in Saudi Arabia, and there's also a very big Egyptian workforce in Saudi Arabia, which we always talk about, mutual benefits and mutual partnership between the two countries. How do you see the mutual benefits in such a relationship with regards to the Egyptian workforce and investments as well in Saudi Arabia?
Exactly. As I said, that when there is attraction for investments, you'll find all businessmen who are looking for that. And that's why some of our businessmen have found in Saudi Arabia what they're looking for in terms of incitement to invest, and tax facilities and other facilities that the Saudis are providing. And I think this is what attracts some of our businessmen to do. Of course, it's disproportionate when it comes to the Saudi investment here in Egypt, but this doesn't mean that Egyptians do not have the appetite also to invest in Saudi Arabia. And I think this is understandable, since we have various fields where we have an edge over others in order to work there. And we are talking here about some of our main interests, such as energy, the renewable energy, of course, and of course other sectors like construction, like
the electricity grid as well, that the
this
electricity
is again
exchange, another
energy project. So I mean, there are various projects that Egyptians are working on. Let's not forget that Egypt have been helping in the renaissance, if I may say, of Saudi Arabia after the 1973 war, when lots of Egyptians traveled to Saudi Arabia and contributed largely to the development of the country, whether we are talking about infrastructure or projects or other issues. I mean, Egypt have always stand next to Saudi Arabia in all its endeavors. And we are expecting Saudi Arabia also to help Egypt at this critical moment. It's not a secret that Egypt have a lot of debts, and one of the most important things is to attract investors, and accordingly we can export, and then we can have hard currency that will help our Egyptian pound and to help also to pay the debt services that is actually weighting too much on our budget and our
Indeed.
economy.
Right. Mr. Ambassador, now regarding Egypt's investment potential, we discussed the real estate market, etc. Let's talk a bit about some of the opportunities available in Egypt with regards, for example, to industry, to agriculture, to tourism. These are all, and the real estate, as you said, in the North Coast, etc. These are all, you know, very, very rich opportunities with very big markets and great potential for collaboration and investment opportunities. How do you see the different variation when it comes to the availability of opportunities in different fields, in different sectors in Egypt?
There are various fields in Egypt that we need more investment in those fields, and I think the Saudis have contributed in most of them. We've seen them also working in the fields of agriculture.
Yes.
We've seen them in small industries. And I mean, I mentioned several times the macroeconomy, but it's not just about that. I mean, maybe the opportunity or the circumstances made me mention them because of the royal visit of the Crown Prince.
Yes.
But actually, there are other fields which are regular industries and regular factories. I mean, I know several Saudi factories which are not big size, but they are working in various fields that we need them. It needs some foreign investment, and they came and they helped. So actually, I mean, the idea of naming, I mean, all fields of investment and industries in Egypt are open, and actually, I think that not just Saudi Arabia, any country is welcome as long as it will see the infrastructure that is ready to use their investment in order to make new industries even. But let's focus mainly is going to be in the project that we need. This is what we need the most, which are the energy projects at large, I mean especially the renewable energy, and on second thing, which is the agriculture field, which can use a boost, because agriculture now, I mean, after we finish with the cultivated area, I mean, in order to cultivate new areas in the desert, we need more investment to that. Let's not also forget to mention that Saudi Arabia is one of the leaders country. I mean, most of Saudi Arabia is deserts, as we all know.
So they have great expertise.
And nevertheless, they managed to cultivate many crops such as corn and flour, of course,
wheat,
I mean, wheat as well, and so on. So, I mean, we can benefit also from their experience in such hard lands to cultivate.
And of course, this touches on the issue of food security as well, which is a very relevant topic for the two countries, both Saudi Arabia and Egypt rely heavily on wheat imports rather. And with the situation in Russia and Ukraine, we've seen a disruption of importing wheat, etc. So food security is another issue that is being discussed between the two countries, and another aim for them as well.
Well, actually, wars in total, they destabilize everything.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
I was just reading a report that Egypt lost around 65% of its revenues from Suez Canal because people are turning around Africa instead of going through the Suez Canal because of the Houthi attacks. And the Houthi attacks, it's because to support the Palestinians against the Israelis and to stop any boats from coming to Israel through the Suez Canal. And actually, we are the one affected, although we do not support these acts, but we understand the reason behind. And maybe that's one of the reasons why we are trying to attract more investments in order to compensate for the loss of the Suez Canal. As we all know, it's the first or maybe the second revenue coming from
for Egypt, yes,
for hard currency in Egypt.
Indeed. Now, Your Excellency, in September we saw the Crown Prince announcing a $5 billion investment in Egypt by the Public Investment Fund, known as PIF, during a meeting he held with the Prime Minister, Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, held in Riyadh. How do you see such agreements, contributing to an increase in investments? And we're talking about quite a substantial amount of money as well.
Of course, this is a big amount of money, and the projects, I'm sure, that have been discussed, I mean, which kind of project they are going to invest in this money. But I see the symbolism of this, which is to encourage more and more private sectors to invest in Egypt. I mean, if Saudi investors see that their own state, their own country is investing in Egypt, this will encourage them to come. So I think this was a call to attract the private sector in order to, and encourage them in order to invest in Egypt. I think that the fields are going to be the fields that I just talked about, especially the field of energy.
Yes.
And let's not forget that we are talking now openly about military cooperation between the two countries, and maybe this would lead to a new era in the relation between the two countries regarding military equipment and so on. Let's not forget that both countries now, they both joined the same day, the BRICS. And with BRICS we have the Russians, we have the Chinese, and they are both big exporters of arms, and maybe there could be a collaboration within BRICS and those two countries, I'm talking here about Egypt and Saudi Arabia, to collaborate with Russia, for instance, for production of weaponry that could be our own. And this, I think, is going to be a very important step. Indeed. When you, instead of importing weapons, you can produce them. And this will give you some kind of independence from the usual suppliers of military equipment. Indeed.
Just before we wrap up, my final question to you, Mr. Ambassador. Now, we're seeing as well a large delegation accompanying the Saudi Crown Prince, and the Egyptian-Saudi Joint Committee has played a very big role in achieving continuous integration as well as mutual coordination across the years, numerous areas as well of shared interest. How do you see the role that they play, and what horizons of economic cooperation between the two countries do you see in the near future?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned this, because actually I hope this visit we will see the signature of the Supreme Coordination Council between the two countries with the presence of the two leaders. And this is not a usual event. It's not just a High Commission. No, we are talking about Supreme Coordination Council, which means that we are trying to promote and upgrade the relation even further between the two states in order to further achieve more goals for ourselves and for the region. Let's not forget, again, I have to repeat this, that we discovered during the last war, the last Israeli war on Arab territories in general, we have seen the position of many countries, and maybe this is a bell that shows us that we have to depend on ourselves more than we depend on others, if we can do that. And I believe that with the cooperation between Egypt and Saudi Arabia, we can achieve a lot, provided that we both have the same target, which is already there, and we both understand the challenges that are facing the region, and the necessity on not depending only on the West in general to provide us, because the West have proven in a way that it's totally irrevocable that their support for Israel is unconditional, no matter what, and this will definitely in the future affect our decisions politically or economically, not just in Egypt and Saudi Arabia, but I believe in the Arab world in general.
Absolutely. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for our coverage. I'd like to thank you very, very much, Your Excellency, Ambassador Medhat Miligy, the former assistant to the Foreign Minister. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your time and all your insight.
Not at all. Thank you for having me. Glad always to be on.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for this coverage here on Now TV International. You're in the company of myself, Angie Meher. Thank you for watching.